You know, we've been hearing all about Russia, and we've been hearing about Vladimir Putin, and we've been hearing about Putin's oligarchy. These are Putin's oligarchs. Who are, Putin's oligarchs? Well, have you heard of this man? Let me get you a picture. One Roman Abramovich. Well, he's supposedly one of Putin's oligarchs, and he's also the owner of Chelsea Football Club. Now, if you can see my tracksuit here, I'm a Brazilian football fan, and my team is Palmeiras. But some of these English, they follow this club Chelsea, who are owned by this Russian. Now, he's just had Chelsea Football Club taken away from him because he's Russian, and because there's some allegation that he has ties to Putin. Okay? Now, so Putin apparently has oligarchs. Okay? Let's have a look at some of them, shall we? Oh, isn't that a funny picture? There he is. There's old Putin with his oligarchs there. We've just seen one alleged oligarch, Roman Abramovich. Who's this one? It's another man. And there you go. Oh, there you go. Right, so why am I telling you this? Well, the media would like you to believe that it's just places like Russia that have an oligarchy. Well, on this Saturday night, I'm letting you into my life. What is my life? Well, now that my health is having challenges and maybe I'm in the final chapter of my life, I'd like to share with you what I've been doing. I've been fighting a resistance. I've been a soldier in the resistance against Australia's oligarchy. You didn't know we had one, did you? Australia has an oligarchy. Yes, we do. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through Australia's oligarchy tonight. Okay? A little bit. But here's Putin. Here's some pictures of Putin's oligarchy, right? Now, these supposed oligarchs are having their big toys seized by governments around the world. A lot of these oligarchs tend to have these big yachts with helicopter pads and submarines, and they cost about 200 million or whatever it is, right? So these guys are running scared because governments around the world, who have their own corruption questions, I have to say, plus humanitarian problems, are seizing these rich man's toys. Right, now, so I said to you that it's a bit, well, I'm telling you, it's hypocritical in a way, because Australia also has a oligarchy. Yes, it does. And in fact, when did Putin come to power? Can anyone tell me? Does anyone out there know what year Putin came to power? Was it the early 90s? I think it was. I think it was right after the breakup of the Soviet Union, wasn't it? He came on after the fellow that drank too much. Do you remember him? What was his name? I remember he went to England once and he was saying gins and tonics, and he was drunk all the time. Anyway, he was replaced by Putin in the early 90s, and then Putin and these oligarchs basically took control of a lot of Russia's big natural reserves, its gas, its oil, Russia being its biggest export being energy, and they became billionaires. But also, there was another oligarchy starting somewhere else in the world. And where was that? Right here, in Australia. Around about the same time that Putin came to power in Russia, another man was on the rise. And you're watching Australia's oligarchs tonight, coming to you from my sofa on this Saturday night, as I take a breather, literally. And here he is. Are you ready? Australia's oligarch. And the story is just as murky as the scenario in Russia. But you'll never hear about it, right? Because, I'll tell you why. Because Australia is corrupt. Well, at least the government are. The people are wonderful, but we've got a terribly corrupt government, and I've been fighting it. Many of you don't know that, but I've been fighting it for 30 years. There's been court battles. There's been all sorts of stuff, and it's actually led to me being a witness to this UK infected blood inquiry. My statement's been published. There's been evidence that apparently my life is at risk, and that's because I keep bringing out the facts about Australia's deadliest medical scandal and about the billions of dollars that are involved. And I, had credible information that people want to kill me. Not very nice, is it? As I said to you before, not to you, as I said to them before, anyone that wants to harm me, you better hurry up, okay? Because I'm not too well. But here we go. So, Australia's oligarch. Meet Brian McNamee. There he is. So, as Putin came to power and as the Soviet Union collapsed, a public servant called Brian McNamee joined the Commonwealth Serum Laboratories. Now, excuse me, Brian, I might be out by a month or two, but it's my understanding that you joined in 1989 or 1990, somewhere around there. And he was on a public servant salary, and he joined Commonwealth Serum Laboratories, which was owned by the Australian public. Commonwealth Serum Laboratories began in the early part of the 20th century, and they're Australia's vaccine maker, owned by us. And also, they used to make vaccines for the war effort in the 20th century for our soldiers. They make anti-venems, okay, pretty important in Australia, the old anti-venem, isn't it? If you get bitten by a snake, you'd probably have an anti-venem that had been made by Commonwealth Serum Laboratories. So Commonwealth Serum Laboratories was an important arm of government, okay? It also made blood products. And those blood products were used by Australians with the bleeding disorder haemophilia, and it would also make immunoglobulins and things like that from blood plasma. So, Brian McNamee joins this Commonwealth Serum Laboratories on a public servant salary, and then mysteriously, soon after joining, Commonwealth Serum Laboratories becomes corporatised when the Australian Labor government at the time said, well, we'll allow you to run it like a private company, but it will remain publicly owned. Wasn't that music to Brian's ears? Now, the next thing that happened was Brian McNamee, on a public servant salary, decided, well, why don't we privatise Commonwealth Serum Laboratories? It's an Australian asset worth billions and billions of dollars. Why don't we privatise it? Commonwealth Serum Laboratories, now known as CSL for short, is worth something like $140 billion. That was what the worth of our asset was. So Brian talks to his friends in the Labor government and decides, well, why don't we privatise billions and billions worth of this Aussie asset? And suddenly, CSL is sold privately for a song. Sounds so much like Russia's energy reserves going to Putin's oligarchs for a song, doesn't it? They're sold off for a song, and suddenly these people become worth billions overnight in Russia. But at the same time, an Australian state asset was being sold off for a song, and that was Commonwealth Serum Laboratories. And suddenly, this man here, Brian McNamee, the public servant, was listed as one of the only people in history to have made a fortune from a government float. He suddenly became Rockefeller. Well, today, decades later, Brian McNamee is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Public servant salary, privatisation of a state asset which goes for a song, and the Australian taxpayer loses out millions, and he ends up worth hundreds of millions of dollars? So tell me, do you think it's only Russia that has an alleged oligarchy? Couldn't it be that Australia has one too? What else would you call it? What do you call that? Are you a public servant? Are you a bureaucrat? Maybe you're watching this live, or maybe you're watching the recording. I don't think you probably earn, hundreds of millions, would you? So what do you call this? A public servant that earns hundreds of millions of dollars? Oh, I think you call it oligarchy. Yes. And that's why tonight I introduce you to Australia's big fish, the oligarch. And he's also the man covering up Australia's deadliest medical scandal, the that I've been fighting for decades. You see, you know why they privatised CSL? Oh yeah, there was a reason why they privatised. You see, in their own documents from the years before that, they were very worried about something. What were they worried about? Well, they're worried about the fact that they've been making these blood treatments, which they collected from high-risk donors, even infectious blood donors, and including unhealthy donors from overseas, and even people in jails. And CSL decided to bleed these people, harvest their blood plasma. I mean, no one else wanted it, right? CSL said, well, give it to us. We'll make it safe. We'll sterilise it. We'll heat treat it. We'll eradicate any viruses that might be there, okay? Well, guess what? They said they were going to do that, but they didn't. Their own records show that they didn't. And in fact, today at Infected Blood Australia, we just shared the criminal evidence of exactly what they did. They said, listen, this is going to cost too much money. If we heat treat this and take the viruses out, there'll be a drop in profits. A drop in money, rather. And a drop in yield. So we won't do that. There it is right there. There it is. Yeah. So they told everyone that they'd purified it, but they hadn't. So, by the late 80s, their own documentation shows that they knew that they'd infected everybody that used their product. And so, the government, who are the owners of Commonwealth Serum Laboratories, were going to have to face the music, weren't they? And they were going to have to rightly pay compensation to victims. Only the next thing you knew, Brian McNamee turns up. This man turns up. And suddenly, the plan changes. Instead of facing up to the fact that they just murdered at least 1,400 Australians, and including others around the world, it could be, the body count could be thousands and thousands. Instead of facing up to what they'd done and warning the public and warning parents that they'd just given their children contaminated blood treatments, they decided instead to privatise. Why go to jail when you can simply privatise and become worth hundreds of millions anyway? And so that's what happened. The public servants at CSL all made loads and loads of money. And the media all promised to do nothing but laud this company. They're an Australian stock market darling. You'll often see everyone talking about CSL. Oh, you've got CSL? Will CSL go above $300 today? My God, what a dynamic company. Oh, wow. We've had Australia's Health Minister, Greg Hunt. He goes to black tie dinners. He was at the CSL's 100-year centenary and he gave a speech. He is perhaps arguably Australia's most successful entrepreneur. Brian McNamee, yeah, he is. I don't think so. No, he's Australia's most successful oligarch. And he certainly made the most successful getaway when he privatised that company after they'd murdered all those children. So, there you have it. We're hearing about Putin's oligarchs, but they'll never tell you about Australia's oligarch, Brian McNamee. So for the best part of 30 years, I've been fighting these corrupt elements because I happen to like Australia, and I very much liked the members of our group that died because of bad business by CSL and the Australian Red Cross Lifeblood. But because of the cover-up and because they've got so much money, it's been a long and hard fight, and a few people are tuning in now, thank goodness. But so I now find myself, becoming a little bit more disabled than when I began campaigning. So perhaps my opponents might think that, well, this might mean that I'll finally leave them alone. No. Oh, no. No, not at all. No, this will mean I'll go for you even more. I'm never going to leave you alone for what you've done. Yeah, I don't like people who harm children. And I don't like people who harm, or knowingly harm, medical patients either. So, you can expect plenty more monkey business from me. That's right. And you can expect some serious stuff too, as the net closes in on these scumbags that are ruining Australia and taking advantage of us. Thieves that steal state assets, these oligarchs and these people that are covering up Australia's deadliest medical scandal. Thank you from my sofa. I wanted to show the world how it really is. Often when I do my videos, I'm up and lively, and that's only because I'm currently well for that moment. These days, most of my time is spent in bed and spent lying here on the couch. But we have wonderful volunteers at Infected Blood Australia, g'day, and the show will go on. And by the way, we have the form that you can support our call for a royal commission into Australia's oligarchs and into the contaminated blood scandal by clicking on the link in our bio if you're watching Instagram, or if you watch on any other platforms. We have about 2 people who watch us on Twitter and about a few people on Facebook. We are shadow banned everywhere because of me. The reason we get shadow banned is I keep sharing facts about oligarchs in Australia. You can't do that, okay? You're always going to cop crap if you do that, but we'll just keep on going. We'll just keep on going. They may have all the money, but we have all the fire, Brian McNamee. We do. We do. What happened with all those bodies, mate? Eh? What happened with all those people you killed? When are you going to come clean? And how does a public servant go from, a public servant salary to being worth hundreds of millions of dollars, eh? Eh? I think we know how.